Shabir. Tell me what it means when people throw out the term Satanic Verses, because people like to talk about this, particularly those who aren't Muslims or critics of Islam like to bring out this term. Tell me what it means.
As you said, it has become the title of Salman Rushdie's famous book, but prior to that it was already a term that was bandied about in reference to some verses of the Quran which were said to have been once revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but not collected in our copies of the Quran. Verses which, in contradistinction to the rest of the Quran, which was revealed by God, verses which were revealed are somehow thrown in by the devil, as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was trying his best to recite the Quran which was being revealed to him by God. So the story goes that the non-Muslims who were opposed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, heard those verses, and these verses seem to indicate that somehow there is a compromise being made with their belief system. Somehow the Quran now is going to accept the deities that they held dear.
So the monotheistic sort of message got watered down.
This is how they saw it. This is what those verses would seem to indicate, because it's referred to the gods that they worship, three of them mentioned by name, as though these are the high cranes or the exalted swans whose intercession is to be desired or to be hoped for. And it is said that when the non-Muslim opponents heard the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, reciting such, they, along with the Muslims, prostrated at the end of the chapter. So those verses, because they were thrown in, according to the story, by Satan, by the devil, they came to be referred to later on as the Satanic Verses.
Now, what do you think of these reports of these verses? I mean, are they something that we can put our trust in?
No, these reports seem to have been fabricated reports that came to be put into circulation much later, and eventually it got to be repeated so many times, and it was such an interesting story that it stuck, and it came to be recorded in some of the classical Muslim writings. And there were some.
Why do you think it was fabricated?
We cannot know for sure why someone would have fabricated it, but we can be fairly certain that it is a fabrication for a number of reasons. One is that this is a report regarding an event that occurred, if it did occur, in the very early part of the Prophet's career, when he was in the Meccan phase. And during that time, the events that transpired could hardly be remembered well enough in the later years, when eventually the reports about the Prophet, peace be upon him, would start to get collected, and when people would really be paying close attention to the details of his life. Because in the later part, when he moved to Medina, that is when his actions became demonstrative and became normative for Islamic practice. So Muslims would try to observe what he's doing to copy that. But in the early phase, people were not so quite paying attention. Moreover, the earliest report, or the earliest authority to report this story is Ibn Abbas, who was a famous and learned Muslim. But he himself was born several years after this event, or this supposed event, took place. So he was born, it is said, about at least 4 years after the event. So in that case, he is himself reporting something that he would have heard from others. He might not have heard it even directly from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because if he had, he would have said so, and he doesn't say so in the report. So we are dealing with a report which, even from the face of it, is a very weak report. It is a second-hand sort of narrative.
So we're to assume that, the Satanic Verses did not actually, there is no such thing as a Satanic Verses.
Yes, and you asked, why can we be so certain? Well, to add to my previous answer, John Burton, who is a scholar from the University of Edinburgh in the United Kingdom, wrote several books on Islam, and he wrote several articles as well. And one of his articles that deals specifically with this particular problem is entitled, "Those Are the High-Flying Cranes," again referring to the verses which were said to be the Satanic Verses. And he says that the Quran that has been revealed prior to this verse so far had been dead set against idolatry and polytheism. If suddenly the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, recites one verse, as the story says he did, which had been somehow inspired by Satan, and gives the impression now that the Prophet Muhammad has made a 180-degree turn and is now suddenly accepting the pagan idols and giving them credence, then he himself would lose all credence on this occasion. Rather than to say that people will be so naive as to suddenly submit to his cause because he says one little thing in their favor, they would now wonder, is this guy really worth believing, especially since they were so opposed to him up until this time. So that would spell actually the end of his career, but it didn't. And that shows that a story like this did not actually occur. It is a later foisting back of a story into the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, long after the event itself.
But given that it is in the report, let's say somebody believes it. I mean, would that call into question the revelation itself?
No. Some Muslim scholars had in fact accepted that this event actually occurred as described, but they subscribe to an internal logic within which the story does not really affect the truth of the revelation. Because what they have said in essence is that as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was reciting the Quran to the public, and now there are a wide variety of reports which of course conflict with each other, and each makes it appear that the other doesn't really know what it's talking about. But even if we assume, let's say, a basic thread that runs throughout the variety of reports, to say that while he was reciting the Quran, somehow Satan threw something in so that the people heard that there was a verse, which really is not a verse of the Quran revealed by God, but something thrown in by Satan. The Muslim scholars who accepted that said that God in the Quran itself says that if Satan throws anything in, then God wipes that out, and God confirms his own revelation. So they interpret a certain verse to mean that it is possible that Satan throws something in, not only with our Prophet Muhammad, but with any of the previous prophets, and God just simply wipes out what the Satan tries to interject, and God confirms his own revelation. So they will point out that what we now have within the covers of the Quran are nothing but the revealed message from God himself, and whatever Satan tried to insert on that occasion, the verse that is specifically mentioned in the story, that has been removed, and it's no longer a part of the revelation. It never was a part of the revelation, and so there is no problem according to their internal logic. But I stress again that there are good reasons for thinking that that story was not really a true reflection of the events.